Oh my gosh, you guys, it's been so long since I just got to do some paint and hang out with you. Tonight I'm going to paint from this still frame of the Blade Runner movie, one of my favorite sci-fi movies, period. I don't think I have to put any kind of criteria on that. It's just awesome. And um, here painting one of the, my favorite characters from the movie, obviously Joy here with the protagonist. And the thing, the movie is super cool because, I guess spoiler warnings, it's been out for a long time, but super cool because the original was awesome, and the kind of things it brings up makes it consider. But the way that this movie, the newer one, Blade Runner 2049, kind of takes those themes and pushes it even more. We all kind of like, is Deckard from the original one? Is Deckard? Is he real? Like, is he alive, or is he a synthetic, or not, or is he like alive or not? And there's so much to indicate that one way or the other, it doesn't really matter that that he's got enough display of, and so do all the other synthetics, that they display so much life as it is that it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just like when we in the United States, deem one. We have different criteria for deeming one life more valuable from another, and it all just at that point just becomes gross. Life is life, and it all deserves to be valued, kind of, and then further in this one, there's like the argument is that unless if you're made, you don't have a soul, and if you're born, you do, and that kind of now the new criteria is if you can have offspring, and is that then the criteria for being alive and getting the rights that affords one thing over another, and all of the kind of super cool and obvious the ways that sort of points back at our society and the inequity and the injustice and on and on. But what I love too is that the movie goes further then and says, okay, well, we kind of established that you've got all this all of these overlays pointing back at our within the story, all of this artificial life, all this synthetic intelligence that's we've kind of are like, okay, whatever, they're so lifelike, they're so I mean, like, who would argue that there isn't some serious ambiguity and problems with what's going on there? But then they take it further, and there's Joy, right? So Joy is this character that she's like a product that one can buy, and by the crazy scenario in this story that Kay, the protagonist, is this artificial intelligence that's been sent out to exterminate other artificial intelligence, and he has an artificial intelligence girlfriend that's like basically a downloadable that or a subscription service or whatever, but she's basically like a digital companion, and one of the most memorable scenes is he comes home, and I mean, I think every scene with her is really memorable, but he comes home from just another day of destroying artificial and some other synths, and she's there, and he kind of microwaves some slop and puts it on his little like one person eating station, and the fact that he has to eat and he has to make dinner, and but it is one thing all into itself, but then the fact that he has this artificial like girlfriend who's there, and she's made him a dinner, right, that like is holographically projected right on top of his dinner, and it's of course much better and more beautiful than the thing he's eating. And then and then, you know, she's like charming and interested and engaged and encouraging and all the things that, you know, any person who has a slog of a life wants to come home to, right? So she's like programmed to be everything a person would desire. And in this case, strangely, I don't know if it's every example or download of this artificial intelligence or holographic projection or this little program or whatever she technically is, you know, I don't know how much, we don't know how much similarity there is between this her and all the other hers, but or instances or whatever, but or manifestations, but she's, you know, for the sake of the movie, acts as sort of like a universal. She's designed in the movie to be sort of a universal. I mean, not like a negatively stereotypical, but kind of like stereotypical. Like this is what a guy would want. You know, he may, if from a companion, might want someone to be interested in his life and to be engaging in conversation and to make things lighter than they might actually be when they're kind of miserable, and to make things fun and just that sort of like tenderness mixed with that kind of conversational skill set and encouragement and playfulness and like all of that, right? And it's all there on display. And what's kind of crazy is he's kind of playing the role of that kind of 50s stereotypical man that's, you know, come home a little bit gruff, a little bit silent and stoic, and a little bit emotionally absent or distant, and she's the one that's sort of the enchanting kind of homemaking conversationalist who enlightens and enlivens the mood. And so all of that like looks like this weird sort of enchantment, kind of trying to harken back to this 1950s sort of ideal of sorts, and what's so weird, so weird, is that it's these programs, these like artificial intelligences that are playing out this scenario, which I guess they were programmed to be enchanted with, right? To evoke in, and it comes to life in that kind of dance of their two role plays. And what's so crazy about it is how exactly like that it is in our real lives, right? Like what was that philosopher Slavoj Žižek says, the purpose of film is to teach us how to desire. And you know, we think about how influential everything is that we see in media, and we know all this, right? Like, isn't it like any, and how the pursuit of the things that we see gets us into these roles, and we start to role play this life that which may or may not be authentic to us, and which it kind of like, you get into this really almost icky kind of inquiry where you start to say, well, what is really authentic in maybe in my beloved, you know, or is she or he the just product of days and days and days and days of programming from the powers that be, from television, movies, decades and generations of media pressures and everything, like from, and I remember being in like a small group study, and in this case they were studying like some faith-based stuff, right? And all, it was funny, like you didn't have to even listen to the video this one person brought to you. Just knew everything that this narrator was going to say, because it's basically like this, what I see all over the place, right? Or we are just kind of like surrounded by these signposts, there's sort of instruction manuals on how we should act, and how we should believe, and how we should hope, and how we should desire, and how we should love, and why we should love, and what is justice, and what isn't justice, and what is equity, and what is freedom, and we have all of these different prescriptions that are just hammered into us all the time, right? And it's so obvious, and anyone that has like half of a brain knows that we're subject to just immense pressures from not just social media, but from our faith communities, and our political organizations, and our workplace, and on and on and on, right? So I was talking to a friend of mine who was asking about my time in Spain or in Italy, and when I've traveled, and what daily life is like, and just talking about the little bit of difference that you can glean from which feels like an immense difference that you can glean for just being there maybe a month or something, and how different life feels in different parts of the world based on how people do life, and what the roles of in the family are, and what the habits in the family are, or what the value of work is, and how that looks, and how that manifests in the daily schedule, and the priorities, and all that stuff, right? And there's just a very much like not like a critique of these American ideals in the movie, but sort of an examination of them by just making us examine them by putting them in this interesting context, where you're like, you have to look at this Blade Runner who's like a synthetic man, an artificial man, who's having an artificial relationship with his program girlfriend that he downloaded from some someday app store to be his holographic companion when he comes home from his job in this artificial world, in this artificial landscape, where there's not even it's something that's also pretty fascinating, is there's like, he at one point finds this little sculpture, this little armature made out of wood. It's a little horse, and the material itself being made of wood, of actual tree wood, is so valuable that he could effectively, run away and retire with just by selling this thing, which in our world today would be of trinket of absolutely no value. Just it would be a piece of scrap on the floor of Home Depot or whatever. But the amount of wood that was utilized to craft this small little sculpture in that world is so rare that it's invaluable almost, right? It just shows how completely artificial the world in Blade Runner has become. And here we are watching a movie about an artificial man having an artificial girlfriend in his life, where it's all been programmed. But then you think, like, how different is that really from us, who we're receiving the same kind of programming, if not from such a direct source as to be, downloaded into our brains with our, okay, so there's a lot of, there's this like kind of awareness in the story. He's like, oh yeah, I have memories, but they were put there. They're not my own memories. They're kind of just, everything is just kind of planted in there. Well, it's just how it is. And I have a little boy, right? And as a parent, I tell him all the time about his when you were one, that you did this. When you were two, you did this. When you were, you don't remember that, like, of course, because you were so little. But and these kind of recounting of him as a younger version of himself, or this recounting of him as ... right? I can tell his eyes just prick up, or his ears just prick up, and he's wrapped with attention to hear about himself as this more in his more original state, and he just wants to know so much. What was I like? What did I do? What did I eat? What did I? And there's already this. I mean, of course, I'm telling him what I remember. I'm not like fabricating what happened or anything, but if I were so willing, like, or inclined, I mean, I could say, oh, well, you did this and you did that, and kind of prescribe a path for him by saying, well, this was your original way, or this has always been the case, or whatever, right? Like, you can, as a parent, can always kind of lean into and accentuate whatever you want to in that regard, and so while maybe in the movie it's a little more overt, right? Like, there are these artificial programs or intelligences or whatever they are it's more prescribed, it's more overt, but is it that much different, really? I love the movie because it not only is about the modern problem of that like, you could lean into talking about, of course, technology and AI and all that, but you could talk about immigration and social classes and the history of violence and exploitation of power and lower class workforces and all of this sort of like enculturation and all kinds of super cool stuff. But I just love those little moments where Kay and Joy are sitting there pretending house, just like so many of us pretend house or pretend this or pretend that. It's fascinating to see, like, if I was to go through my Instagram feed, or I was to go through my Facebook feed or whatever, and see how many, there's always the big jokes, like, right, you go and everybody goes and takes the same picture of the same thing for their Instagram profile, or everybody does the same thing, or if you go into one Target, you can be in the Target in California, the Target in Colorado, or the Target in New York, and the Targets all look the same, and you can pretty much know exactly where the suntan lotion is in every Target. Doesn't matter, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna go get some baby wipes or whatever. If you know where they are in one store, you can probably guess where they are in another. And similarly, like, it's so easy to guess at, like everything is so prescribed and everything is so automated and everything is so uniform that you can. I don't notice as much for like a male, because I'm a man and I just kind of like don't pay any attention. My clothing is like so basic and my style is just all about comfort or whatever. It's like, it's not, I don't like have much in the way of style. I just sort of dress for ease and comfort. But like I pay attention and I notice that sort of as it affects like how women might present themselves. Because I have a wife who I'm always so curious about, and I love the beauty that comes from like that kind of the ornamentation that comes out of like that whole world that is in my wife's life that's not in mine, and that kind of more like female quote-unquote beauty, right? So and so I look at that more, I see that more, I draw and paint models or friends on Instagram, and so it's so weird how uniform everything is, the way people's hair is and their style and their facial expressions and the way they carry themselves, and what and we make fun of it all the time, like, oh my gosh, but how insanely common the visual expression of everybody is, and how uniform it is. And then you watch these artificial programs kind of, I don't know, they're just playing at the same game we're playing at, and it just throws the whole thing into such a strong light that you can't help but just think about it all. And there's a lot of question about, well, is Joy acting out of her programming? Is she just following the the prescriptions that and the code that she was given, right? Like, hey, do this, do that, be this, be that. Or is there evidence that she's doing what she's doing because she is also, in her own way, unshackled, unfettered from those programs, that she is come to life, that she is acting of her own accord, taking risks with her own life, whatever that life is. And we don't know, right? Because we don't ever get to see enough information to make any firm conclusion one way or the other. But all I do know is that even if there's not enough evidence in the text of the film to say, oh yes, definitely this, or oh yes, definitely that, we do know that even if she's just acting out her program, and as enchanting as that is, it's still just like a program or whatever, like, or if she is, by some miracle of artificial intelligence or so whatever, or like life finding a way, she has come alive and is breaking rank with what she's supposed to do. If she has a secret life all in her own, the thing is we'll never know, right? We'll never know. And just like we'll never know with our beloved, or in real life, right? Like everything is an act of faith. Like, what is the secret heart of my wife? You know, when she's gazing at me, you know, is she really thinking about me, or is she thinking about some obscure thing, another person? Is she just, you know, this is why we have so much inquiry, right? When we talk to our beloved, oh, what do you think about that? What does that mean to you? Well, you seem to be a little put off by that. Why was that? And went on and on, the questioning, right? The questioning, trying to understand and probe the depths. And maybe after decades and decades, we start to get hints of, you know, we know maybe how they're going to respond, and we know maybe how they're going to feel, but there's always an act of faith, because we don't really know, and they don't really know us either. And even if we're, you know, wholeheartedly honest, which I have never really met someone that was, we aren't even fully equipped to understand our own motivations, you know. And so there's like, I love that movie. I love watching these programs acting out this life of great passion, or these moments of little secrets, or these transgressions, or these whatever, you know, because it just makes me think about us and me and my family and my wife, or why so many things are so hard to talk about, or why some people in my family are so good at pretending certain things that they don't even know that they're pretending, or the roles that we play for so long, we forget that they're a role that we play, and they just become us, you know. And at what point is there any difference between that and what these programs are doing? It's so freaking interesting to me, and how it exposes so much about what we are, and what life is, and how much will always be a mystery, even between and in the most intimate relationships, that there's just this faith that it just always only going to be able to be about faith. It's just going to be about commitment and faith. It's not about having knowledge, control, understanding. It's just about sticking it out and choosing to stay in regardless of what happens, you know. Like, it's and that for many, maybe even with a rigorously examined life, how much do we ever even extract ourselves from that programming that is so comprehensive? The ideology of just being a part of whatever society that we grow up in, and how impossible it is to extract ourselves from that stuff, really. And at the end, not at the end, but nearing the end of the film, there's this kind of moment where, again, spoilers, but Joy she suggests that she has to go with Kay, and that she has to be deleted from her particular instance of herself, has to be deleted from the home server, basically, because the authorities will be coming looking for Kay, and they'll be able to use her against him with all the knowledge that she has of him and his whereabouts and his plans. And so he reluctantly agrees and says, but if I take you with me, you in this little, like, basically my little, like, USB drive with projection capabilities to let you holographically project yourself into my space, if that gets broken, lost, or destroyed, then you will die. You'll be as irretrievably gone, right? And she says, basically, you're more important than me. Let's do this thing. It's like this kind of beautiful risk-taking love act that makes you think, like, at that point in the movie, I'm thinking, she's amazing. Like, she has real love for this guy, and then there's just this little voice in the back of my head that's saying, yeah, but it's just the programming. But I'm like, but it feels so real, and she's amazing, and she's all in, and and whether or not it's just the programming or not, she does make a very big self-sacrificial choice, and then as things play out, she does get, like, that little fob or a USB gizmo thing, like, it gets smashed under the boot of the antagonist, and Kay, who looks like he's basically expiring, is dying there on the floor. All he's reaching for is her. So whether or not it was fake or real, it's all he, it's where his heart was, or his whatever, if he has a heart, right? And he's reaching for her, and it's like this crazy moment of, it's really evocative, and it's really compelling, and all I can think is, I'm watching it, is no, like yelling at the screen, and it doesn't make sense, right? Because but it's like watching your Sims characters or something. I haven't played Sims in forever, but, like, have some tragedy, and would you be moved by it? But, like, so let's think about it. Like, in the movie, we're watching an actress play a holographic program who's playing at loving this artificial intelligence, and I am feeling overwhelmed, like, this can't be, oh no, and yet how different is that than, like, any other movie where you're watching Brad Pitt pretend to be a Greek god who's, like, fighting for just whatever, and you have you're emotionally invested in the narrative, but it's all pretend, right? And it's like, it's all pretend, and that's the thing, like, at what point is it ever not pretend? My son, again, just looking at the child, he's 4, right? And he's always pretending. He's always pretending, play acting. The other day he said he saw a blue jay, and he says, I wish I was a blue jay. I said, why do you wish you were a blue jay? He says, so I can fly. I would love to fly. I want to fly. And in his brain, he'll go into these moments where he's like, he'll find a cloak or a cape, and he pretends then he can fly, and it's very present, and it's as if the pretending has come to life. And I don't know, like, sometimes I wonder, at what point are we not pretending, is all I'm saying. I'm repeating myself, but we like go out on a date with our spouse, or our significant other, or whoever, right, a friend, um, and how much of that is pretending, and what are we pretending at, or even in the rejection of the pretending, are we still like, we're still being kind of reined in by the expectation of being in a certain way, you know. um, Back to the painting for the first time, as I was painting kind of far away, and the reason I was doing that is because, I mean, like, if I could zoom out, I mean, Photoshop, that's just Control minus on the keyboard. You can go up to the navigator and kind of slide a little scrub the little slider and zoom it out or in. But it's kind of nice to like not have to be all up in there on the brushwork, but just to kind of get back and look at the big shapes. I don't know. It's just nice to not be in it so much. Just get back. And there's problems with this drawing. It doesn't really, like, proportionally doesn't kind of read, and her face is a little more square. I've got it kind of elongated a bit. Easy to fix, but you know, just kind of not worrying about the details. In his proportions, he's got a more of a square head, and it should be a little more elongated. So just kind of show you real quick, I can quickly just select an area. You could use a more detailed selection tool, but you can Control C, Control V, paste it. Control T could like let you squish it a little bit, and then, you know, there I've just pinched it in a little bit, and if you can look at the difference, you know, that just helps it look a little more like him. And it could go a little further if I want to, but go back to that original layer, and let's do the same thing with her. Just Control C, Control V, and Control T, and then I'm just gonna mush just a wee bit, and we can look and see. I might have gone a little too far. Let's see. But I'm compelled by I love science fiction. I'm compelled by it. I love I can't decide what to do. I love the way in which a scenario like they can set up in that movie is so poignant, and how you know, the first layer of questions we might ask: is she real? Is he real? Are they acting of their own accord? And I'm just going to merge the layers that are visible here so we can kind of go from there. But and then you know, it's not like that question doesn't matter. It's just that that's not like where that questioning ends, and where it ends is such a crazy place. Like, is anyone else other than our own, outside of ourselves, even knowable? Like, ultimately, or am I even knowable? Right? Like, as I spend my life cultivating my inner self as this kind of this place where the real questions of my heart get exercised, and the purpose of my being gets sort of gets oriented, and all that. And I spend so much time there. I don't know if you do, but like, I spend so much time there, right? And then all of that work, all of that time, all that space, and is it ever even transferable? Like, what of that can you ever even give, share, offer to another? And how inarticulate it always feels to do that. You know, like, the role of poetry and storytelling and art and all that is to, you know, for me, is to access that in a way that is hopefully sort of like that the suggestions that those mediums can afford us, can afford me, can give me some like way to point toward those things in a way that maybe other people can read. And how beautiful and strange it is that when someone can actually read that and jumps in and says, "Ooh, I see you. I see what you see, and I weep with you, or I jump for joy with you, or I laugh with you. I see what you see," and how special that is, you know. And you think, how strange and spellbinding that is when that happens. And or how like if you've read a book or a poem or whatever, and it just like it rocks you, and you fall back in your chair, or you lay back in the grass and your eyes fill with wetness as you're like staring up, and for the first time you see how far away the sky is, and how far away the stars are behind that sky that's hiding them in the light of the, in the day, and then and how small and yet how connected everything feels. And like those moments where like in the story Blade Runner, they say interlinked, is the word that he uses in this kind of reprogramming, souls within souls interlinked or something like that. There's this sort of like mantra he has where he's kind of reorienting himself at each day so he doesn't get too far afield of what his programming is aligning him to be. And when you feel that being interlinked, and you and it's overwhelming, and like those moments are so amazing, right? And whether it's in the context of another or with yourself or whatever, but then like I don't know, it just, I wonder, I just wonder about all of that. It's one of those movies where you could watch it again and again and again. I mean, the trajectory of the protagonist is so fascinating. The trajectory of Joy is so fascinating. The trajectory of Love, this other character, is so fascinating. Even their like naming and their intersections of their choices and stuff, like that's such a cool movie. It's, but just kind of focusing on these dreams and that we have, and like how we are playing out these narratives that are prescribed for us, and how can we say oh, they're not real when we're doing the same thing and all that. I love that in movies. I love that I was watching that one show on Amazon called Man in the High Castle, and in that it's super unnerving and creepy when you watch. There's like, in that the premise is that the Axis won the conflict of World War II, and America is now this new Germany, and the Nazis have kind of occupied everything from the eastern seaboard all the way to kind of Kansas, if you will, and there's like a boundary, a kind of a permeable boundary that separates that space, the eastern seaboard, all the way to the kind of the Midwest, from the Japanese occupied West Coast, and the kind of the free zone of, or what might be loosely called the free zone, sits there in the middle of kind of the Rocky Mountains and Colorado, and kind of up through Wyoming and Montana, and you're sitting there, and there's these scenes where there's this high-ranking official in the show's like Nazi administration, and they're having this dinner that looks like the dinner that every 50s family was supposed to be having. And the fact that there are like Nazi flags in the background and like pictures of Hitler and stuff, it makes that projection of fascism into that scene really unnerving, because it kind of opens some very necessary examination into this question of how different really are some of the ideals that are being promoted today, right? Then like what it looks like on the ground, so to speak. Like not obviously not talking about the same degree of like extermination of minority populations or or outcast populations or whatever, but in the United States, there are certain ideals that have certain dark sides, right? And to just examine them within the context of that story where everything is upside down lets you see it with fresh eyes, and not making it any I'm not making any statements one way or the other about what I think is being said, or if there's like a sharp political edge to it or anything. It's just making us look at what the American life could look like through a very different historical lens, and what that makes with what would be different and what would be the same, and that's worth talking about, right? And similar to this, like you get this scene where these two people who are not people are having very people-like feelings and making very people-like choices, and very, very courageous things are happening, and it's incredibly evocative, right? And it's almost more so because the context and the different risks that are afforded them, and then the choices they make within those circumstances. So, love sci-fi. Another one I keep thinking about a lot is The Arrival, and we should, if you like hearing me ramble about random stuff, we should talk about that movie too. I haven't really done much painting, actually. I've kind of just been rambling, but this was a lot of fun, and I think the two characters they picked are perfectly cast, or the two actors they picked for the film are perfectly cast, and they're really fun to draw, both of them. I love how Ryan Gosling, I'm very bad with my Hollywood people names, but the actors, I think he is really, really freaking perfect, because he kind of, like I was talking about, that kind of gruff and distant, emotionally distant, or reserved or something, kind of 50s male character. Then there's Joy, who's this like expressive kind of it was like a slight accent and very, like, I don't know, there's just something about maybe I love everything about the look of their faces, the sound of their voices, the costumes and outfits that they wear, the interactions, the risks they take, all the things that are being suggested by all of it. It's amazingly fun, and I haven't done either of their portraits justice here, but I just think everything about the casting, to the costume design, to the narrative choices, to the story arcs, like, I just think it's perfect. I haven't been so satisfied by a science fiction movie like I was in that one, by that one in a long time. So yeah, just having fun. This painting isn't so much about getting it done right tonight. This painting is more about just the fact that I am painting. There's been such a long road that our family has been on with suffering that we've been enduring, primarily my wife and her long-term illness, and just the kind of like collateral damage that has on all of us, that I look at a lot of my artist buddies, and they just, they get out and they paint, they go do plein air events, they go do gallery events, but for us, going to the grocery store is an outing. For us, being able to get to the park without there being some catastrophe is a successful day. For us, life is way different than I can't begin to tell you guys how chronic illness can be so, can create so much upheaval, not just in the big picture of like your finances and the stress, or but I'm talking about every moment, about the way that it affects your ability to take a shower, or what taking a shower used to mean versus what it means now. That would be like a whole hour-long conversation. And what just what everything looks like because of the impact of what we're dealing with, right? And that makes even like the fact that like just makes the fact that I'm painting right now feel all the more special, because so often like I am so tired by the end of the day that it is so easy to just want to pick up my game controller and just play PS4 for a long time, which usually looks like playing PS4 for like 10 minutes and then falling asleep with the controller in my lap and me not even getting past the menu of the game that I was trying to play. And never mind all the super fun stuff that life maybe used to have in it. And that's not a sob story. That's just me telling you, like, when I make a video, I don't have expectations of it being like, oh, you know what, I'm going to craft this perfect video of doing this perfect thing, and I'm going to go, give these 7 tips, and it's going to be, sometimes I just want to paint. And I'm always just happy when I'm able to paint and be awake enough at the end of another long day to actually do it. And there's something that is absolutely magical about painting, because it's watching something completely artificial come to life. And it always is a little different than I expect. I'm not one of those artists that sees it clearly in my head and says, I must make this, and then the rest of the painting is just revealing the truth that was hidden within, or something like that. Usually it's more about a feeling, and it's more about exploration of materials and media, and it's about trying to just paint until it feels right, kind of. I'm using like a mix of Kyle's brushes, Greg Rutkowski's brushes, Peleng's brushes, and a bunch of other kind of my favorite illustrators and concept artists and digital artists that I've found across multiple websites, multiple years of goofing around with this stuff. So kind of have my own favorite brush list. Usually I prefer brushes that are really textural, and for me that's the magic sauce, is having something that has a bit of grit in it and looks a little rough, because I don't really like that airbrushy soft look that default digital art kind of like makes so easy to do. That kind of art I just don't like. I just don't like how it looks. I don't like how it feels. I don't want to do that. Life to me never feels smooth or definable. It always feels a bit chaotic and full of nuance that is beyond description. Like at the same time, one can feel completely enamored and disgusted by the same circumstance, and that's why I like when I paint. I want it to to be both coming and going at the same time, you know, to have like an edge that is both there and disappearing at the same time, because that's what all life feels like to me, you know. It's like it's falling apart as much as it's coming together all the time, and that's what I kind of find beautiful about it. So I guess the dance that I'm always kind of trying to figure out when I'm painting is like how much detail is enough and how much detail is too much, and you know, most importantly, like what feels right. Obviously you can't kind of like escape the fundamentals where like hard crispy edges are going to pop forward, big contrasty areas are going to pop forward. The opposite is true of the opposite, and big saturated areas are going to, you know, demand your attention, and more desaturated neutrals are going to do the opposite, and so on, you know. But like, so that's certainly like always a part of my thinking. I don't want certain things to pop too much, I want other things to pop more. Like, for example, look at all the contrast and edges here, look at all the softness here, how nice it would be to get a little more attraction to the reflection and wetness in the eyes, versus looking at, you know, the neck and the shirt collar. You know, like there's things that need to be addressed in the drawing to make it work, but beyond those kinds of fundamentals, I think the goal is to get a little more just the right feel, you know, the feel of making meeting the feel of you know, trying to get some semblance of that inner life's accounting of what's happening on the canvas. I also like having really big textural brushes just because I like the lack of control. Again, it's just an observation about life that I like to have in my art, is I don't want to have too tidy of a grasp on what's happening, because that always feels fake. So I think I might leave it here for now. We're close enough to see where it's gonna land, and I finally feel like I was able to capture some of the real satisfying little shapes that make up the totality of her expression and proportions. And yeah, the particular like hairstyling, coloring, costuming, characterization, acting, face acting, postures, all the things that she is able to bring to the film are like so perfectly synchronized, and what she's kind of representing is so well accomplished and so well acted and so well written, that I just love kind of seeing that character engage. And the same thing for Kay. I just think some incredibly well done stuff. And the color palette is so cool also. So yeah, I just love this movie. So anyway, here's me rambling about Blade Runner 2049, about life and about just everything. And here is me just playing with the brush a little bit, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for checking it out, and I really am grateful to be able to be here doing this tonight. Thank you.